It Takes Radio Company invites you to another adventure, the Stanley Jones Radio School for Fully Alive Living. And today, somber day, I am sure that on this date, 80 years ago, that Stanley Jones was very, very sad. So let's talk about that today. Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen. You are invited to the Stanley Jones School for Fully Alive Living, and my name is Stanley, but I'm Stan Hustad, and it is my privilege and my pleasure working along with the Stanley Jones Foundation and with Ann Matthews Younes as we are putting together this new volunteer adventure. That's why we need your help, because we're volunteers. Putting together this program, hopefully on a weekly basis, and that's why it can be adjusted from time to time because we have other major work responsibilities, but we want to help keep alive the wonderful legacy and tradition and the wisdom of Stanley Jones, who was ahead of his times 50 years ago. And his wisdom, insight, and truth is still ahead of time, for sure. And so we want to do all we can to encourage younger men and women. We're getting along in that age and stage. We want to have them not only read him, understand him, and become encore imitators. They will be living encores of the wisdom, insight, and truth, and the remarkable communications ability of Stanley Jones. So that's what this is all about, and we're grateful that you're taking time to be with us on this 6th of August. Now, first of all, I'm not in the studio today. I'm actually in a workplace, and there's a good reason for that. You see, I'm not a pastor, priest, prophet, any of those things that make you kind of a professional religious person. I did spend 10 years as a missionary broadcaster all around the world, and that's where I learned how to do radio. I worked with many organizations, BBC, Radio Netherlands, Transworld Radio, did all of that, but I didn't get paid for it. I was a volunteer, and along with my family, we had to actually raise our own support to make sure that we could do that for 10 years, right in the middle of the time when we could have been making a lot more money, but the Lord had at least called us at that time to do something different. And we live with both the rewards and the consequences of that wonderful choice. However, I really believe that the work and wisdom of Stanley Jones should be used as I used it, not only as a broadcaster, but then as a business performance coach. And the wisdom that he has is certainly spiritual and religious and divine, but it's also incredibly practical. In fact, I particularly use the work of Stanley Jones, not just in my broadcasting, but when I was working, and it wasn't as a Christian coach, I was working in the hard and tough arena of financial services, working with men and women who were working hard in that industry, and I brought some of the very wisdom that I learned from the man, Stan the Man, as I would call him, into the modern day workplace. And I believe I still want to do that. And maybe you'll be able to help me do that from time to time. So that's what this is all about. Now, one of the things that strikes me about the work we're called to do, particularly as Christian communicators and as broadcasters for sure, is to make sure that we're speaking right into the moment. Today is August 6th. It also happens to be my wedding anniversary, and we chose the date forgetting that August 6th was a day, I'm sure, that struck and hit and deeply saddened Stanley Jones. I know it must have. He must have had incredible mixed feelings on this day. I don't know where he was. I'm sure Ann maybe could help me find out. But August 6th, 1945 was the day that the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Bam! 80,000 people immediately ushered into eternity, and thousands more will follow. It was obvious to Stanley Jones that he had very much wished that he could have helped to prevent the Second World War, as he had some kind of statesman-like status within the Asian community at that time. But he was not able to, in his humble and certainly wanting way, to make sure the war, of course, Pearl Harbor, and the slaughter of millions of people took place in the Second World War. And obviously, Stanley Jones probably, as he was listening to the same news on August 6th that came across 1945, he, along with many others, heard the story that this could be the end of the war. Unfortunately, the Japanese did not surrender. And so on August 8th, they got it again. And an even more ferocious bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. And the war came to an end. But I just know that that kind of experience, to be the kind of man he was, that certainly celebrating with the people who said the war is over, but also deep, deep sadness on the scale of what sin can do in a world gone mad. And the world needs Jesus. They didn't need Christianity. They didn't need denominationalism. They didn't need any of the things that they thought they needed, like militarism, nationalism, Nazism, fascism. They needed Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And he had spent, obviously, many, many years trying to make that happen, and had had some reasonable success in Asia and parts of the world. But boom, the war had come. And the war was horrible. And the ending of the war was tragic beyond measure. And of course, that led to eventually, within a week, the Japanese knew that the war was over for them. And the emperor agreed to surrender. And with the surrender of the German Nazis in May, and with the surrender of the Japanese in the 15th of August, the war came to an end. Of course, it didn't bring an end to the wars. We know that story. So I'm just simply commemorating the passion and the love of Stanley Jones. And that then he didn't give up. Now what does he do? He does what God had called him to do in a world broken by war. And even, in fact, it's going to lead to a situation in India where the colonial empire of Great Britain is going to come to an end, and then the independence of India will be celebrated by many. But of course, it led to a tragic massacre as both Hindus and Muslims went to war against each other in the wake of the independence movement. So those are things we know about as men and women of history, of experience, and of faith. And so it's really good for us. And this is why I very, very much understand that that's why there was so much personality and personal transformation. Stanley Jones was not in the business of TOT, teaching other theology. He was in the business of TOT, teaching other transformation. and teaching young men and women and anybody who would listen from 7 to 77 and on beyond that there is a source of power greater than the atom even. There is a source of transformation that can be found, not in weapons or in politics or in denominations or even in religions, but it's a source of power that in the coming of Jesus and the invitation that he brings to bring his Spirit with him and his establishment of a new kind of world, the kingdom of God is here. Some people have said that he was trying to change the world. Well, not really. He was inviting us into a very different world. I oftentimes point out to people, they say, oh, Stan, you work in the real world. And I guess, what they mean by that is that I'm out there in the workplace. And I say, no, not really. I say, the real world was the one that Jesus spent a lot of time in, and so did Stanley Jones. That's the world of God's kingdom. Transcendent, not necessarily seen, certainly experienced as moments happen and people find a touch of the kingdom, a lightning bolt of it. We live in reality, but we don't live in the real world. And what Stanley Jones was about was to say, the reality world is not good. The real world is the one we are inviting people into. And I still, obviously, born the same year of the atomic bomb, and even at this advanced age and stage, still want to have the energy. I know that probably Stanley Jones read a very famous 19th century American preacher by the name of Philip Brooks, a man who was incredible in terms of he was very similar to Stanley Jones in the fact, even though he was a denominational man, but as a speaker, as a lecturer, as someone who lived the faith, who said, don't pray that your problems will go away. Pray that you will have the power to deal with them. Don't pray for an easy life. Pray that you will have the power to live well. And I'm sure that might have come to mind when Stanley Jones said, I have to receive the power to now be a pastor and a preacher and a counselor and a teacher, to live and teach and speak in a world that has been broken. And maybe I can give a word of healing in Jesus' name to a broken world in 1945. And you know what? That's what he did. And he did it for a long time after that. Best and blessings on his name. I hope that in some way, I will never live up to my namesake, but some ways that in my own passion and energy, and you too, who are watching this program, experiencing this a little bit of a radio rant, but certainly a testimony to my own experience, will say, give me the power, the poise, the energy, the wisdom, the determination, the direction, and the resilience of Stanley Jones to live well and to minister and to work and to share God's great wisdom and the Jesus story. That's what we're in the business of doing, sharing God's wisdom and telling the Jesus story. Let's ask him to help us do it well. All the best and blessings to you. I wish that you would reach out to us and help us out. Stan@witradio.net, Stan@witradio.net. Ann and I would be grateful if some of you would feel led to make a contribution, both to reestablishing the power and influence of the foundation, which is going through growing again times. We want it to live, survive, thrive, and we want this ministry that really there will be a worldwide school of Stanley Jones School experiences, inviting people to do just that. Become fully alive through the power of the surrendered life to Jesus and the power of the Spirit that can come, and the fact that we are creating, along with the Creator, perhaps a way for people to experience the real world of God's kingdom. Thank you for your time. I'm Stan. All the best and blessings to you. We'd like to hear from you. And we're going to start teaching you how to use the modern media to be encore teachers and communicators like Stanley Jones. I'm going to teach you how to be on the radio so that you can use these same modern media experiences to share the wisdom, insight, and truth that you have, that God's Spirit has given you, and perhaps to share some of the wisdom and insight and truth that the legacy of Stanley Jones has given to you too. Till next time, best and blessings, and bye for now.